Friends, like all of you, I feel privileged to be part of a wonderful celebration of a great development philosopher, and I use the word philosopher advisedly, and a great human being with a heart as large as the world itself, and a celebration of friendship. We've talked a lot about Robert's influence on our lives and work. I believe that many of the world's greatest, most profound ideas are the simplest. And from Robert, we learned many of these simple ideas. But if I was challenged to summarize all those 40 books in one line, I would perhaps say, listen to people with respect. I think that's what I would summarize. Listen to people with respect. And I think that the idea was subversive in the time it was made. It is even more subversive today. It was subversive at the time that it was made because we were living in times when the social sciences felt that if they had legitimacy, they had to be as close to the physical sciences as possible. They must be detached, they must be impersonal, they must be objective, they must be distant, they must be uninvolved. They must be adversarial in many ways. And I think Robert's work rescued people from being reduced to statistical cannon fodder. It taught us to respect people's wisdom, the wisdom of people who may not have formal education and articulation of the kind that we are familiar with. He taught us the limitations of survey methods, which we've talked a lot. I recall in my own training in economics, a professor in the London School of Economics used to tell a joke about statistics, and he said statistics are like a tribal man who's caught in a rural police station in India, which is quite infamous. And if you torture both statistics and that rural man enough, they can tell you anything. I do believe that when we're trying to understand people's lived realities, especially the realities of people who are highly disadvantaged, there are limitations to survey and quantitative methods. Although over the years I've grown a little less skeptical than I was when I started. Why should one want to learn about people's realities? As Marx said, one wants to learn about them primarily because you want to change. I want to understand the world because I want to change it. What is the relevance of the ideas that Robert has brought to all of us and enriched our lives and work in the world today? I step back and say, what is characteristic of the world today? I believe that, in the times of, when these times that we live in all over the world are written about, there will be two features that what qualify our times. The first is what I would describe as the exile of poor people from our conscience and our consciousness. I see that very much about middle class India, but I see it all over the world. Poverty and inequality and injustice was always around us. But we cared a lot more. Our films, our poetry, our literature, what we talked about in our coffee tables, what we talked in classrooms, what we talked on in policy discussions, what budget speeches were primarily about the poor and the disadvantaged. You would imagine, living in my own country, if you watch our films, you would imagine that there were no poor people in India, that everybody lived in designer homes with fancy clothes and a lot of money. It's really remarkable that poor people have disappeared from our cinema. And Indian cinema is very close to people's consciousness. In the films of the 50s and 60s, you had stories about homeless people, about farmers struggling for their land. They've all disappeared. And I think we've decided that those people who have privilege should not be guilty about it, and they should lead the good life and not even care. And I think we are bringing up our children very differently from the ways that we were brought up. That's one thing that characterizes our world, I think, today. The other thing is the re-legitimization of prejudice, particularly after the global war on terror. All sorts of, what is globalized is also drawing room conversations about, which happen to be focused on the Muslim community, but full of prejudice, and people are not ashamed of it. And therefore, I do feel that learning about truth with respect for people who live that truth is a very important understanding. I find PRA methods limited in the work that I do. I work with the homeless, I work on hunger, I work with people in conflict. I find it limited, conventional PRA methods, limited in talking about discrimination. What does it feel to live after a massacre, after a hate massacre? What do you feel? What do you feel when you're considered socially inferior because of your gender, because of your caste, because of the faith that you follow? How does it feel to live hopeless, to have the hopelessness of living with hunger when you know that your life will not change? I'm not sure I could understand it even in a PRA method. And I think that those methods have also got very routinized into a set of... But I think the more basic philosophy behind it would teach me how to do it. And in the limited time I just wanted to give one illustration. We were trying to understand, the whole discussion around hunger, and I work around hunger, we're working on a right to food law. I feel that, economists, nutritionists, all sorts of professionals write about hunger. But the writing is so detached and so impersonal. What does it mean to live with hunger? I recall a conversation with some Musahar women, we were talking about them this morning. And they said that the most difficult lesson of all that they have to teach their children is the lesson of how to sleep hungry. And I understood a lot when they spoke about that, and they talked about how days when they go out and look for pieces of grain. So I decided after that to do a study on how do people live with hunger. What does it mean? 200 million people sleep hungry in my country. What is life for them? And what we did was that we thought we would, learning from Robert Grill, I thought, let us make our primary researchers people who live in those communities from those social categories who live with hunger. So we found from those villages that we were studying, we found single women, disabled people, old widows, old people who've been abandoned, mostly without literacy skills. And we had a team, and I sat with them and talked about research methodology and so on. And what they used to do was every day they would go and meet one person who was a widow, and she would then take them to another person, and they would take another, and they'd spend a day with them, and they'd talk about things. In the evening they'd come back, and we had what we called the middle class researcher, who was actually their scribe, was the secondary researcher. Their job was to listen to what happened during the day, what did people talk about, what did they talk about their lives, and to write it out. And in this way, over 2 years, we collected an understanding. And I learned many things which I found most people didn't know. And I just wanted to list those three, just to say how important that learning was. The first thing that people who have to live with hunger hopelessly do is to adjust their bodies in a way that they start feeling that they don't need food, because that craving is too much. So from three meals you go down to 2, from 2 meals you go down to 1, and you start wanting only 1 meal. The second thing they do is to look for pseudo foods. What I call pseudo foods is actually things that you get free in the environment, but which have no nutritional value, but they're free and they fill your stomach. So in every group of people who live with hunger, they have identified, mango kernels, grasses, tubers, many of them poisonous. You boil them and you fill your stomach with them. You ask your neighbor for the rice starch after the rice is being cooked, and you keep it overnight and you have it and you fill your stomach. And the third set of choices, third answer is to make desperate choices. So you send out your 4-year-old child to work as a domestic help. you put your son into bonded labor, you sell your child. These are the ways, and I would never have understood this if I had not had the respect to listen to people, and listen both to the people who are living this reality, but also to listen to those who research this reality, who are also living this reality. And that is my tribute. I really wanted to talk about this particular study as a tribute to Robert and what I've learned from him. And maybe if all of us follow this methodology a little closer, we would challenge those two features of our time. We would end or fight to end the exile of the poor from our conscience. And we would fight to end prejudice about poor and disadvantaged people. Thank you.